This is the story of Elliot Carterson, of a billionaire raised inside a golden mansion yet quietly aching for something real. His mother died when he was just 2. Since then, he's lived like crystal, polished, admired, and painfully fragile. Until one ordinary afternoon, he saw Lena Bennett, a market girl, laughing as a paper airplane landed in her hair. A laugh so free, it cracked something open inside him. That moment changed everything. The black limousine came to a stop, stuck in afternoon traffic at a crowded market street. Inside, Elliot Carter, age 12, sat in silence. His mini tuxedo was perfectly pressed, his Italian shoes polished to a shine. His eyes wandered out the window, unfocused. He was on his way to piano class, just like every Tuesday, scheduled since he was 6. Outside, the world looked more alive. Makeshift stalls, the smell of vegetables, street dust, and human voices calling across each other. And then, amid the messy crowd, Elliot saw her. Lena Bennett, around 11 years old, her blonde hair was tied back quickly. She was helping her mother sell vegetables. In her hand, a crumpled paper airplane, folded from food wrapping, crooked and soft. She threw it into the air. It didn't fly far. It dropped and tangled itself in her hair. And she laughed, not a polite giggle, not the kind of laughter Elliot was used to at elegant parties. It was real, loud, unfiltered, and fearless. Elliot froze. He had never seen anyone laugh like that, not for a camera, not to be praised, not because they were told to, just because a crooked paper plane had failed to fly. The driver glanced at the rearview mirror. "Master Elliot, would you like me to close the curtain? This area isn't safe." Elliot gently shook his head. "No need." The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the thin glass, casting a soft golden glow around Lena's face, as if she was the only thing in this world untouched by pretense. And in just a few brief seconds, Elliot realized his heart had stirred for the first time. After that first afternoon, Elliot was no longer the obedient boy who sat quietly in the car every time it passed the market street. He began making excuses to his butler, to his tutors, claiming he had a social survey project or an art assignment that required observing real life. But truthfully, Elliot just wanted to return to the place where he had first felt his heart truly beat. Lena wasn't surprised when she saw Elliot the second time. She simply smiled, offered him a piece of chewing gum, and said, "Not everyone's brave enough to come back to the place that once made them feel small." From then on, they became friends, real friends. No bodyguards, no tuxedos, no formal greetings. Just 2 kids sitting on a cracked curb, folding paper planes from old calendar pages, drawing on the sidewalk with colored chalk, and sharing a slightly stale sandwich Lena's mom had packed that morning. One time, Lena saw Elliot fumbling endlessly with his shoelaces. "Let me show you the quick way," she grinned. "You'll need to run faster for tag." Elliot laughed. "For real?" Not out of manners, not out of habit. In the middle of the dusty market, surrounded by noise and fading walls, he felt something he had never found inside his gold-covered mansion: real warmth. On a windy afternoon, as they sat under an old tin roof, Elliot turned to Lena. He didn't look at her directly, like the words would break if said too clearly. "With you, I finally feel like a real kid, not a museum piece." Lena didn't respond. She just smiled softly. But that silence felt like peace. Elliot kept their friendship hidden like a treasure. He didn't mention it to his tutors, left no traces in his digital journal, because deep down, he knew if his father ever found out, the one true thing in Elliot's life might be taken away too. That afternoon, the sky was still. The sunlight fell softly over the cracked walls behind the marketplace. Elliot and Lena sat close together, carefully sketching a giant paper airplane onto the wall with colored chalk, its 2 wings uneven, one pale blue, the other bright yellow. Just like them, imperfect, but flying together. They didn't know someone was watching from a distance. Preston Carter, Elliot's father, a billionaire who tolerated no surprises, had ordered his son followed after noticing he'd been slipping out of the mansion without bodyguards. And now, Preston had come in person. No sirens, no shouts, just the quiet hiss of a luxury car door opening and the sharp figure of the man stepping out, straight-backed, impeccably dressed, cold. Two tall, silent bodyguards stood behind him like shadows made of stone. Lena froze. Her body shifted back a step, not out of fear, but instinct. She had seen that kind of presence before, the kind that didn't need words to make someone feel like they didn't belong. Preston said nothing. He looked at the colorful chalk plane, still unfinished, then stepped forward and crushed a nearby paper airplane under the heel of his polished shoe. The paper cracked like dry leaves. "We don't play with garbage." His voice was steel, flat, certain. Elliot stood frozen. "She's not garbage," he whispered, then louder, "She's my friend." Preston didn't look at him. He simply made a signal with his hand. The two bodyguards moved in, grabbing Elliot as he struggled. "Don't touch me, I can walk." "Enough," Preston said. "You're leaving, tonight." Lena said nothing. She just stood there, watching Elliot with eyes that didn't beg, didn't accuse, just broke. Elliot was dragged back to the car. As the door was about to close, he looked out the window one last time and saw Lena kneeling down, carefully picking up the paper airplane his father had crushed. Gently, she smoothed out each crease as if she could save the memory the world had tried to erase. The next morning, Elliot was placed on a private jet bound for England. Though the reason they gave, a better education. But the real reason was to tear him away from the only person who had ever made him feel truly alive. 20 years had passed since Elliot Carter was dragged away from that little alley. Now he sat alone in his towering office, surrounded by cold city light and polished glass. He had everything: a tech empire, magazine covers, articles calling him a young genius. But inside there was still an emptiness, shaped like a paper airplane, and a smile he'd never forgotten. Lena Bennett. Her name never left him. No matter how many faces, how many events, Elliot knew no one had ever made him feel real the way she once did. And one crisp autumn morning, not for business, not for duty, he decided to return. No assistants, no headlines, just him, following memory like a compass. The old market was still there, different, yes, but the small alley behind it, the one with the wall where they once drew a plane, remained quietly untouched. He stepped in slowly, and then, like time folding in on itself, he saw her. Lena. She was sitting on the worn brick floor, surrounded by children, hair messy, hands stained with color, teaching them how to fold paper airplanes. Her voice was calm, eyes patient. A child squealed as their plane soared. She laughed, and that laugh, it was hers, the very one he had carried with him for 20 years. Elliot froze. No one knew who he was. No one needed to. His eyes simply watched, quietly, as if reclaiming a piece of his soul. Lena looked up. Their eyes met. She paused. Her fingers tightened slightly around a piece of chalk. But she didn't step back. Didn't ask why. She just looked at him, like she was waiting to be sure it wasn't a dream. She just smiled, gently, knowingly, like 20 years had never passed. And in that smile, Elliot knew. He had finally found the thing his heart had never stopped searching for. Elliot didn't know how long he had been standing there. All he knew was when Lena walked toward him, he still couldn't find any words. She stopped right in front of him, close enough that he could hear her breathe. "You still remembered the way back?" she asked, her voice soft and warm, like the years between them had never existed. Elliot smiled, the kind of smile not meant for cameras, not for interviews, not for approval. "I never forgot." They sat down together, on the same old pavement, beneath the same tree that once sheltered them from the rain. No apologies, no what-ifs, just stories. Lena spoke of the kids at the market. Elliot spoke of a robot he once built that couldn't learn how to laugh. The next day, Elliot came back, not watching from afar. He brought colored paper, pencils, and words he'd never had the chance to say. And just like that, they met every afternoon on dusty sidewalks, surrounded by children's laughter and paper airplanes that danced with the wind. One day, Lena asked, "Do you ever think about that day?" Elliot didn't look away. He looked straight into her eyes. Every day. I thought you'd forgotten. No, Lena, Elliot whispered. You're the only thing I held on to. And when Lena stayed quiet, only lowering her gaze to gently smooth the wing of a paper airplane, Elliot knew his heart had been touched again. This time, for real. That afternoon, the sun was soft and the breeze just right, perfect for paper airplanes to fly a little farther than usual. Lena was packing up her chalk box when Elliot appeared. Not as the billionaire in polished suits, but just himself, in a simple shirt and shoes dusty from the road like he'd walked a long way to get here. "Walk with me?" he asked, voice calm but full of something deeper. Lena hesitated, looked around, then nodded. He led her through the market and turned into the familiar alley, but this time, something had changed. The old wall where they once drew a plane had been repainted, pure white, but now it was full of new drawings, rainbows, skies, scribbled words from little hands, and in the center, a giant paper airplane with two wings, one blue, one yellow. "I kept a photo of our old drawing," Elliot said softly. "I had the kids help me bring it back." Lena stood still. In the amber glow of late day, everything slowed. She reached out and touched the painting, feeling like she was touching a memory brought back to life. Elliot pulled a paper airplane from his pocket, golden yellow with blue edges, just like the one on the wall. "I want to play that game again," he said, eyes on hers. "Will you throw this one?" Lena laughed. "This time, I'll throw it hard." She raised her hand and tossed the plane. It soared in a smooth arc and landed gently in Elliot's open palm. She froze, because on the wing of the plane, handwritten in neat small letters, it said, "Will you fly with me for the rest of our lives?" Elliot knelt down. No diamond ring, just the folded plane in his hand, and eyes filled with quiet hope. "I can't promise perfect, but I promise to always be real. With you." Lena didn't answer right away. She stepped closer, knelt too, and touched the paper plane. Her fingers brushed his. She looked into his eyes, long and deep, then nodded. "As long as you don't fly alone." Elliot laughed, soft and shaky. And in that alleyway, surrounded by giggling children and early autumn wind, they made a promise, not with grand vows or gold bands, but with a paper airplane, and the kind of love that needed no proof to be true. The next day, Elliot returned to the alley, not in dusty clothes this time, but with paint supplies, foldable tables, plastic chairs, and a small handmade sign, "Dream Corner, everyone deserves to fly." He and Lena had decided to open a little space for kids in the marketplace. No big sponsors, no press coverage, just colored pencils, recycled paper, a few secondhand toys, and plenty of paper airplanes. The children called him Mr. Blueshirt. Lena just laughed and said he once couldn't even tie his own shoes. But in the midst of these quiet, joyful days, something happened that Elliot never expected. One afternoon, while he was wiping chalk off a wall, a gray car pulled up silently in front of the alley. The door opened, and Preston Carter, the father who once tore him away from Lena, stepped out. He wore a plain white shirt, no tie, no entourage. Elliot stood still, not in fear, but in the unfamiliar weight of the moment. Preston looked around, at the scribbled wall drawings, the laughter of children, a paper airplane caught on a power line. Then he looked at Elliot. "May I sit down?" Elliot nodded. They sat together on a plastic chair near the old wall, like two strangers who'd known each other forever. "Back then," Preston began slowly, "I thought you needed a life without bruises, a path already paved." He paused, eyes on Lena, who was helping a little girl fold her first paper plane. "But I was wrong. Some things a man has to choose for himself, even if the road is muddy, even if the love is imperfect." From his shirt pocket, Preston pulled out a small, awkwardly folded paper plane with shaky handwriting across one wing. "I hoped you'd fly far, but never forget where you began." Elliot clutched it gently. "I never forgot, especially not the one who taught me how to love." Preston smiled, not the smile of a businessman, but of a father who had finally let go of control and found peace in that surrender. That evening, the whole neighborhood gathered as Elliot and Lena unveiled a new mural wall. Children screamed with laughter. Paper airplanes launched one by one into a sky glowing gold with late sunlight. Lena handed Elliot a special one, its left wing, an old shade of blue, the right wing freshly painted yellow. "It doesn't have to fly perfectly," she whispered. "It just has to fly together." Elliot smiled. He took her hand, turned to his father. Preston nodded. And that little paper airplane, flawed, slightly bent, but filled with love, soared higher than any they'd ever flown. That paper airplane, from the afternoon they reunited, soared into the sky as if drawing a silver line to close the old chapter and open a new one. A few months later, Elliot and Lena held their wedding right there in the alley where they'd found each other again. No grand venue, no gold embossed invitations, just strings of warm lights, a few wooden tables, and dozens of paper planes folded by children. Lena wore a simple dress, lovingly sewn by her mother. Elliot wore a suit, not designer, not chosen by a stylist, but the first one he picked for himself. No labels, no statements, just him. The guests were humble and familiar. The vegetable lady from the corner, the old shoe repair man, the kids who had flown paper planes with them. Preston Carter came too. He didn't give a speech. He simply hugged his son and whispered, "This time, fly far, your way." There was no grand ritual, but when Elliot handed Lena a white paper airplane, pure, folded with care, and 3 small words written on the wing, "Forever starts here," everyone grew still, like they were witnessing something holier than any vow. After the wedding, they didn't honeymoon in the Maldives or Paris. They stayed close to the market, close to the people they'd always called family. Elliot and Lena opened a small classroom, teaching kids how to fold planes, paint dreams, and believe in one truth. You don't have to fly high, you just have to fly true. Every evening, they shared simple dinners on the rooftop of their modest apartment. Where the wind was soft, Lena's laughter echoed, and Elliot always said, "Thank you for teaching me how to live." Some love stories don't need castles or fairy tales. Just a paper airplane, a glance that lingers, and a heart brave enough to take flight. Elliot and Lena weren't perfect people, but they chose to stay beside each other. Despite the past, despite the distance, despite the walls that once tore them apart. And maybe that's the truest kind of love. Not someone who makes you fly far, but someone who chooses to fly with you, no matter which way the wind blows. If you've ever had someone like Lena, someone who made you feel truly seen, leave their name in the comments. Or simply drop an emoji so someone out there who's feeling lost knows they're not flying alone. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Noah's Stories for more tales that gently remind us what it means to be human.